Serafina Voss counted the cracks in the stone floor of the bonding circle. 47. She would remember that number for a long time. Around her, 300 wolves stood in silence. Elders in ceremonial robes. Warriors with arms folded. Young Omegas watching from the back row, because this was what their future looked like, kneeling in a circle while a king decided what they were worth. She had known Aldrich Craven her whole life, the way all border wolves knew the Alpha King. Through stories, through the weight of his laws, through the silence that fell over rooms whenever his name was spoken. She had not expected him to look at her the way a man looks at something he did not order and does not want. He read the rejection words from memory, not from a scroll. That was the part she noticed. He had memorized them. He had prepared. The bond snapped. It did not feel like breaking. It felt like a door closing in a house she had not yet moved into. A soft, final click. She stood up, fixed her dress, walked out of the circle. Nobody stopped her. She had expected someone to stop her. The night air outside the hall hit her face like cold water. She kept walking, past the courtyard, past the iron gates, past the edge of the city where the cobblestones turned to dirt and the dirt turned to snow. She walked until she could not see the lights anymore. Then she sat down in the snow and pressed her mother's ring against her palm until she could feel her heartbeat again. The ring was heavier than it looked. Her mother had told her once that it was not really a ring. Serafina had never asked what that meant. She should have asked. She did not cry. She was 24 years old, and she had been told her whole life that Omega women were soft, and she had decided, sitting in that snow, that she was going to make a very specific point of proving that wrong. She stood up. She walked north. The Vale Mountains were not kind to people who arrived without a plan. She arrived without a plan. For 3 weeks she followed the mountain passes on instinct and hunger, and the faint pull she felt in her chest whenever she moved north, as if the bond scar on her wrist was a compass, pointing towards something it had not yet found. She ate what she could find. She slept in rock hollows with her coat wrapped twice around her body. She was found half buried in snow by a woman named Cora, who looked at her collapsed body in the drift, looked at the ring on her finger, and said only, "We have been waiting for that." Serafina did not understand this at the time. She was too busy being warm for the first time in 3 weeks. The Vale remnants lived in a network of stone buildings carved into the northern cliffs. They were 300 people. Fishers, smiths, healers, hunters, no alpha, no king or queen. They had been governing themselves through shared decision-making for 40 years, since their last ruler died, and no one who came after was strong enough to hold what he had built. They fed her. They gave her a room. They let her sleep for 4 days. On the 5th day she came to the morning council meeting because there was an argument about the eastern water supply, and nobody was listening to the engineer who actually understood the problem. She listened to the engineer. She asked 3 questions. She proposed a solution. The problem was fixed by the following week. Nobody formally asked her to come back to the council meetings. She came back anyway. The 2nd week she fixed a trade dispute with a neighboring settlement that had been unresolved for 2 years. The 3rd week, she reorganized the winter food stores in a way that gave every family a surplus instead of a deficit. By the end of the 1st month, people were already waiting for her to speak before making decisions. She did not call herself a queen. She called herself useful. 5 years passed this way. In those 5 years, Aldrich's empire grew in 3 directions: south, east, west, not north. Nobody went north. The Vale Mountains were considered empty, inhospitable, not worth the resources required to claim them. Serafina was grateful for this opinion. She was also, quietly, the reason the opinion persisted. She had spent 2 years making sure the Empire's northern scouts found nothing interesting, saw nothing worth reporting, and returned to their king with clean maps and empty notebooks. While they were looking at clean maps, she was building. The Vale remnants were 300 people when she arrived. They were 4,000 by the end of year 3. Families from failing outer settlements came north in winter and stayed. Trade routes opened up that did not appear on any imperial map. A small city grew where there had been a collection of cliff buildings. She named it Vale. She was not sentimental about naming things. In year 4, she sent a single letter south to the coastal matriarchy of Sorin, a nation of women that Aldrich had been trying to absorb politically for a decade without success. The letter was 4 sentences long. It said, "We are not his. We are not interested in becoming his. And we have the northern mountain passes that his supply roads will eventually need. Let us talk." The Sea Witch Accord took 11 months to negotiate. It was worth every month. The Iron Ridge clans came next. Mountain wolves who had been selling steel to the Empire for 30 years, out of habit and proximity. Serafina offered them something Aldrich had never offered: a fair price, a partnership agreement, and the dignity of being called allies instead of suppliers. They stopped sending steel south. The Empire noticed the supply disruption 6 weeks later. The Ember Throne took the longest. A firewolf nation that the Empire had driven out 50 years ago and then pretended had never existed. They were not easy to find. They were not easy to talk to. They had been surviving on bitterness and memory for half a century, and they had excellent reasons for trusting no one. Serafina spent 4 months earning the right to sit at their table. She told them the truth about what she was building. She told them it might fail. She told them the risk was real, and the outcome was not guaranteed, and she asked for their partnership on the basis of shared interest, not shared blood. The Ember King looked at her for a long time. "You negotiate like someone who has already been told no in the worst possible way," he said. "I have," she said. He signed the pact the next morning. By year 5, Serafina had not attacked a single imperial territory. She had not marched an army to anyone's border. She had not written one threatening letter. She had simply closed her hand around the outside of the empire, slowly and quietly, and was now in a position where Aldrich's trade routes, steel supply, coastal access, and northern mountain passes were all either gone or controlled by a queen whose name he did not yet know. The first letter from his court arrived on a Tuesday. It was addressed to the Vale settlement, which told her exactly how much intelligence they had gathered. She received the imperial envoy in the throne room that her people had built from borderland oak and marble, that had previously belonged to an imperial outpost. She was wearing deep gold, which was not a color the Empire used for ceremony. She had chosen it for exactly this reason. The envoy was a careful man. He read his message from memory, which she noticed. He was good at his job. The Alpha King would like to discuss recent trade disruptions at his earliest convenience. Serafina looked at the letter. "Noted," she said. She kept his letter. She wrote her counter-proposal on the back of it. A list of terms, not offers. She sent it back with his envoy and watched from the window as they rode south. His answer arrived in 9 days. He was coming himself. She made him wait at the border for 4 hours. This was not cruelty. This was the memory of 47 floor cracks and a bond that had been snapped like old rope by a man who had not needed to look at her face to do it. 4 hours was not enough time, but it was the time she had. When she finally received him in the outer hall, he walked in and stopped. She watched him take in the room, the court, the Ember King's representatives standing to her left, the Sorin matriarchs to her right, the Iron Ridge chief behind her. She watched him understand, in real time, what kind of room he had walked into. "Queen Serafina," he said. His voice was the same, steady, controlled. She had forgotten how controlled he was. "King Aldrich," she said. There was a pause. She had last seen him 5 years ago in a stone circle, while he was rejecting her in front of 300 people. She had expected seeing him again to feel like something, anger, or grief, or the sharp pull of a bond she no longer had. What she felt instead was nothing she needed to manage. The bond scar on her wrist was silver and quiet. She had not realized it stopped hurting until that moment. The negotiations took 3 days. She watched him work. He was not a stupid man. He understood quickly that the position he was in was not one he could buy or fight his way out of. He had an empire and an army, and a throne built on generations of accumulated power, and none of it could fix the fact that his steel was gone, his coast was closed, his northern roads were blocked, and the 3 nations that had made this happen were all sitting in the same room, looking at him with calm, polite faces. She negotiated honestly. She did not try to take his empire. She had never wanted his empire. She wanted the thing that could not be taken back once it was given publicly. On the morning of the third day, she placed a single document in front of him. Formal recognition of the Vale Kingdom as a sovereign nation, independent, permanent, binding under mountain law, sea law, and imperial law simultaneously. She watched him read it. She watched him understand that the three alliances around the table were all co-signatories, and that voiding it later would mean 3 simultaneous wars. He picked up the pen. He signed it. "Noted," she said, very quietly, and she heard something change in the silence that followed. His court tried to undo it within the week. A faction of his senior council, men who had built careers on the shape of the empire and did not want that shape changed, found a procedural rule buried in old treaty law, a rogue sovereign clause. If they could prove Seraphina had acted as a rogue power rather than an organized state during the early years of Vale's formation, the recognition could be voided. They presented this to Aldrich as the only logical solution. He sat with it for a full day. The argument was not wrong. Procedurally, it would have worked. He had the votes in his council to push it through. He had the legal tools. He had the political cover. He had done the calculation before, 5 years ago, in a bonding circle, and his math had been catastrophic. He looked at what Seraphina had built: 4,000 people in a mountain city, 3 international alliances, a trade network that had grown faster than any expansion in imperial history, all of it constructed in 5 years, by a woman his court had dismissed as an omega from a border settlement, and he felt something he did not have a word for. It was close to humiliation. It was close to awe. It lived somewhere between the two. He removed the faction, not quietly, publicly, and with the kind of consequence that made the rest of his court understand clearly that the subject was no longer open. Word reached Seraphina on a Friday. She was reviewing grain allocation numbers when Cora came in and told her. She listened, nodded, went back to the grain numbers. That evening she stood at the window for a long time. She did not know what to do with this information. She did not know if it meant something, or if it was simply a man making a correct political calculation for different reasons than she might have hoped. She decided she did not need to know yet. They met at the border one more time. Not a negotiation. No one had asked for it officially. It happened because both of them were near the boundary line on the same afternoon, and there was no good reason not to speak. He found her standing on the neutral stone between kingdoms, looking at the mountains. He stopped a few feet away. Neither of them said anything for a moment. "I was wrong," he said finally, "about what you were." She looked at the mountains. "You were wrong about what you were allowed to throw away," she said. The wind came down from the peaks and moved between them. She looked at his wrist without meaning to. The bond scar was there, silver like hers, catching the afternoon light. She had never looked for it before. She did not know what looking for it now meant. She was not sure she needed to figure that out today. "Your kingdom is well built," he said. "I know," she said. He almost smiled. She saw it at the edge of his face, and then it was gone. She turned and walked back across the border into her kingdom. The mountain air was clean and cold. Her court was ahead of her. Cora waiting at the gate. The council meeting at the 3rd hour. The new Eastern Road proposal to review before sunset. She did not look back. She already knew he was watching. Not because she needed him to watch. Not because 5 years of silence and 1 public rejection and 1 signed treaty had balanced anything that needed balancing, but because she had built something real and true and lasting in the mountains where no one had thought to look, and being seen for it was not the goal. It was just a fact now, like 47 floor cracks, like a ring that turned out to be a key, like a bond scar gone silver and quiet. She collected it. She kept moving.